Good evening, you're watching The World is One News. My name is Mohammed Saleh. So let's start with a big story that we've been tracking through the day, where amidst the India-China standoff in Doklam, External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj has met with her Bhutanese counterpart Damcho Dorji in Nepal. Now, the two leaders agreed that the dispute in Doklam should be resolved amicably and peacefully with China. Now, Dorji spoke to WION and said that the meeting was fruitful. He also expressed hope that the issue will be resolved peacefully and amicably between the three nations concerned.
Last year I was there. I gave you my case for the administration. Maybe there also.
Well, meanwhile, the United States, which had remained silent for so long over the India-China standoff, has said that it wants India and China to have a dialogue over the Doklam standoff in the Sikkim sector. The State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert said, and I quote, "Now, it is a situation that we have certainly followed closely. We have relationships with both the governments and we continue to encourage both parties to sit down and have a conversation about that," unquote. Now, India and China have been locked in a face-off in the Doklam sector for the last 50 days. Well, moving on to some other stories, where in the latest update on the hearing of the two-decade-old Ayodhya dispute, the Supreme Court has decided to further hear petitions relating to the dispute over the ownership of the Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi land from the 5th of December. Now, close to 3 months' time has been given for making the translations of the historic documents. Now, the Shia Waqf Board in Uttar Pradesh on Tuesday had filed a 30-page affidavit to the Supreme Court over the disputed site in Ayodhya. Now, a mosque can be built in a Muslim-dominated area at a reasonable distance from the disputed site in Ayodhya. The board also said that the temple can be built at the site with a mosque nearby. They also sought time from the Supreme Court to set up a committee for exploring an amicable settlement for the dispute. And also, for more on this, we are joined in by my colleague Jessica, who's tracking all the developments. Now, Jessica, what more information do we have on this?
Saleh, as you have already mentioned, the hearing will begin on the 5th of December, but it's important to note how much the court's time was wasted in figuring out who are the appellants, who are the respondents, and therefore to decide the matter, in fact, to be heard on the 5th of December. Now, talking about those historical sort of documents which you referred to, there are actually 90,000 exhibits which need to be translated, and they are in various languages like Persian, Arabic, in many of the languages which the Supreme Court itself confirms that the registrar of the Supreme Court is unable to, in fact, translate. So it's been given to the state to do so. And the state will produce those translated documents within 3 months. Now, various parties argue that we cannot go ahead with the hearing till we have those translated exhibits of oral evidences, particularly to call them. Until the time those are not translated, we cannot go ahead. So this is exactly what has happened today, but more importantly, the hearing begins on 5th of December.
And also, Jessica, do we have any information as to what are these documents that we are referring to? 90,000 documents is what you mentioned. What exactly are these documents about, and what kind of proof are they likely to shed in this case?
Well, Saleh, I've just spoken to the lawyer who representing the Sunni Waqf Board, who in fact mainly argued that we need to translate those, 90,000 exhibits. Now, these are, remember, oral evidences which were part of the 9,000-page judgment of the Allahabad High Court 7 years ago. But in fact, the parties argue that we've only received them in just 1 year. They've come into sort of an official record. So one has to be able to examine them, and they are in fact so many sort of oral evidences that they need to be carefully looked at before sort of even proceeding with the case, and to what party it suits for to sort of bring up those exhibits, which are in fact very, very important to the case. Remember, the Apex Court did seem concerned with the fact that these exhibits need to be translated, and that there is an urgency to understand why it took so long to translate those exhibits, and why are the parties not really sort of quick enough to get those translated before coming to the court today. So all this confusion, all this madness inside the Apex Court, in fact, finally concluded, and they said that, you know, we will give you 3 months to translate those exhibits, which are in fact very important. Now, these exhibits have been part of the 9,000-page judgment, and that is exactly where these appellants and the respondents are going to begin arguing. Remember, this is a civil dispute case where the Allahabad High Court had given a judgment, in fact, and this particular judgment is being challenged. So, till the time those 90,000 exhibits, which are part of the 9,000-page judgment given by the Allahabad High Court in this dispute, are not really examined properly by the parties, the case cannot go ahead. So naturally, the case has been put forward to 5th of December, where the parties will have sufficient time to read and go through those exhibits and in fact come up and present their arguments.
Okay, meanwhile, we are also joined by Mr. Zafaryab Gilani. Mr. Gilani, right, we've got a reaction which is coming from Mr. Zafaryab Gilani. Let's dip in and listen to what Zafaryab Gilani has to say.
Has asked the Government of India and State of UP Council that whether they can file translation of oral evidence. So they have agreed that they will file the translation of oral evidence within 10 weeks. And thereafter, the court has fixed 5th December to start with the hearing. And on the very first day, as prescribed in the court of civil procedure, the court has asked the counsels of all the appellants and respondents to come prepared with their statement of case.
So that was what Zafaryab Gilani, one of the lawyers representing the case in Ayodhya, or for Ayodhya, had to say. Well, to some news from Pakistan, where cricketer-turned-politician Imran Khan and former Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's daughter Maryam Nawaz have been engaged in a war of words over Twitter. Now, the Twitter spat between Imran Khan tweeted terming Nawaz Sharif's rally as a corruption bachao rally. Now, Maryam for this retorted by calling Imran Khan as a stooge. The ousted Pakistani Prime Minister has been taking out a homecoming rally from Islamabad to Lahore in an attempt to show popularity despite his disqualification by the Supreme Court in the high-profile Panama Papers case. Now, Imran has also slammed Nawaz Sharif as saying that the people who showed up for his rally along the route were just rented by Sharif's party and not really the citizens of Pakistan who were interested in getting rid of corruption. Now, Pakistan reportedly has built an underground facility which could serve as a storage site for housing nuclear warheads, says a report. Now, the underground storage facility is built in a remote mountainous region of restive Balochistan province. Now, according to a US think tank, Institute for Science and International Security, the revelation of underground facility is based on satellite imagery and investigation. Now, the underground site could serve as a ballistic missile and nuclear warhead storage site, said the think tank. Now, the purpose of the secret underground site is still not known publicly, and the underground site has about 3 different entrances which can accommodate even the largest possible vehicles, said the think tank report. Now, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has called on all concerned parties to speak and act cautiously over the North Korean standoff. Now, China's statements comes at a time when the war of words has escalated tensions between the United States and China. Now, after his fire and fury comment, the US President Donald Trump has issued another warning to North Korea, asking them to get their act together or face extraordinary trouble. Now, Trump's statement came after Pyongyang's threat to fire missiles near the US Pacific territory of Guam before the 15th of August.
Obviously, we're spending a lot of time looking at, in particular, North Korea, and we are preparing for many different alternative events at North Korea. If, he has disrespected our country greatly. He has said things that are horrific. And with me, he's not getting away with it. He got away with it for a long time between him and his family. He's not getting away with it. It's a whole new ballgame. I read about we're in Guam by August 15th. Let's see what he does with Guam. He does something in Guam, it will be an event the likes of which nobody's seen before, what will happen in North Korea.
And when you say that, what do you mean?
You'll see. You'll see. And he'll see. He will see. It's not a dare. It's a statement. Has nothing to do with dare. That's a statement. He's not going to go around threatening Guam, and he's not going to threaten the United States, and he's not going to threaten Japan, and he's not going to threaten South Korea. No, that's not a dare, as you say, that is a statement of fact.
Mr. President, can you talk about the nuclear posture and what your priorities are there?
Yeah, nuclear to me, number one, I would like to de-nuke the world. I know that President Obama said global warming is the biggest threat. I totally disagree. I say that it's a simple one. Nuclear is our greatest threat worldwide. Not even a question, not even close. So I'd like to de-nuke the world. I would like Russia and the United States and China and Pakistan and many other countries that have nuclear weapons, get rid of them. But until such time as they do, we will be the most powerful nuclear nation on earth by far.
Now, earlier, Donald Trump had warned North Korea with fire and fury if Pyongyang dared to carry out any attack on U.S. interests within the region. Now, U.S. officials also concluded last month that Pyongyang is outpacing expectations in its effort to build an intercontinental ballistic missile which is capable of striking the American mainland. Now, earlier in a statement carried in the North Korean state news agency KCNA, the Korean army spokesperson had said that the strike plan will be put into practice any moment once leader Kim Jong-un makes a decision. Now, according to a report in Washington Post, North Korea is now capable of fitting nuclear warheads on its intercontinental ballistic missiles. Now, the United States seems to have been adopting a carrot-and-stick approach towards North Korea. The Secretary of State Rex Tillerson had earlier called for dialogue with North Korea if it halts its missile and nuclear programs. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis has said that the U.S. military is prepared for any confrontation with North Korea, and yet he insists on a diplomatic solution.
I understand the question. It's very valid, but I don't tell the enemy in advance what I'm going to do. Our readiness, we are ready. My portfolio, my mission, my responsibility is to have military options should they be needed. However, right now, Secretary Tillerson, Ambassador Haley, you can see the American effort is diplomatically led. It has diplomatic traction. It is gaining diplomatic results.
Now, the U.S. State Department has clarified that there is no confusion over America's stand on North Korea within the administration.
Our secretary has been very clear, as has Secretary Mattis, that our diplomatic and military means are both strong and capable, and in the face of the threats that we face against the DPRK or other nations.
Meanwhile, Guam governor said that they are staying calm, but at the same time making preparations for any eventuality between the two countries.
At this point, there has been no change in the threat level, either in a military base in Guam or in our civilian community. But I can also tell you there's been a lot of statements, you know it, and you're seeing it there on the airwaves and on the headlines. So that is why we are moving, again, not overstating, not understating, but hopefully from what we see and the information we have, staying calm, living our lives, but yet at the same time making preparations.
Well, the European Union has extended sanctions against North Korea after the United Nations Security Council imposed fresh sanctions on the isolated nation over its latest missile tests. Now, the EU added 9 people and 4 entities to its North Korea sanctions list. The Council of the European Union said that the new sanctions also target North Korea's foreign trade bank. The European Council on its website also stated that the decision brings the total number of people under restrictive measures to 62 people and 50 entities as listed by the United Nations. And also, what should China's stand be in the case of the North Korean and American standoff? Well, China should remain neutral if North Korea attacks the United States first, says a Chinese newspaper. Now, the state-run newspaper Global Times has also suggested that if the United States were to carry out the first attack and tries to overthrow the North Korean regime, then China should step in and safeguard its interests. The newspaper writes, and I quote, "It needs to be made clear to all sides and make them understand that when their actions jeopardize China's interests, then China will respond with a firm hand." That China is North Korea's most important ally and trading partner and has called for calm between the two countries. Now, earlier, President Donald Trump had ratcheted up his rhetoric towards North Korea, warning Pyongyang against attacking Guam or the US allies after Pyongyang disclosed plans to fire missiles near the US island of Guam, where it has its military base. The US Navy destroyer has carried out a freedom of navigation operation within 12 nautical miles of China-built island in South China Sea on Thursday. The operation came as President Trump seeks China's cooperation against North Korea and could affect the efforts to secure a common stand over the issue. Now, according to reports, this is the third freedom of navigation operation on Thursday. Also, according to reports, the Chinese military told the US ship to turn around at least 10 times, and the operation is being seen as the latest attempt by the US to challenge Beijing's efforts to limit freedom of navigation in the strategic waters. China's defense ministry released a statement stating that 2 Chinese warships had jumped into action and warned the US ship to leave the ministry. The ministry has also labelled the move as a provocation which could seriously harm the mutual trust between China and the United States. Well, to some news from the South American continent, where Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro wants a face-to-face interaction with US President Donald Trump. Now, while addressing the newly elected Constituent Assembly, President Maduro said that he wants a personal conversation with the US President when the 2 leaders attend a session of the UN General Assembly next month in New York. The United States has imposed a wave of sanctions against Venezuela. The Trump administration had recently slapped sanctions on 8 Venezuelan politicians and security figures, which also includes Maduro. The sanctions freeze US assets of these officials and also bans them from traveling to the United States and for carrying out any business activity with the Americans. The earlier similar sanctions were also imposed on Venezuela, as President Maduro had pushed for the election of the Constituent Assembly, which is a new constitutional body which, as the opposition parties argue, removes the checks and balances on president's powers to amend the constitution. Now, at a time when the gender pay gap is receiving attention globally, a cafe in Australia has taken things up a notch higher. They're finding a unique way to raise awareness about pay disparity. More in this report.
Alexandria O'Brien, the owner of a cafe in Australia, has found a way to raise awareness about the gender pay gap, but with a twist. 1 week in every month, she charges male customers an 18% surcharge on their orders, and this is why.
1 week out of every month, we have an 18% premium for men, which is the same amount as the gender pay gap.
So far, customers have welcomed the idea, calling it a brilliant way of drawing attention to the existing disparity that not too many know about.
I could wear that, considering that there is a fair, it's a fairly unequal pay gap between men and women. Even though that there is supposedly equal pay, it doesn't really equate out there.
The Handsome Her Cafe lies in the Melbourne suburb of Brunswick. O'Brien says to keep things kosher, she's made sure that the surcharge is not compulsory.
If people aren't comfortable with paying it or men don't want to pay it, we're not going to kick them out the door. It's just a good opportunity to do some good.
Reports suggest that it will take civil service more than 37 years to achieve pay equality between men and women. Innovations like this can be considered baby steps towards bringing about a parity at a date a little sooner than the one projected. Bureau Report, WION.
Well, to some other stories. Now, a US government agency report confirms that the year 2016 was the warmest year on record. Now, according to the report, 2016 was also the 3rd year in a row of record global temperatures. Now, the report has blamed the rising temperatures on long-term global warming and the strong weather phenomenon El Nino. Now, both surface and sea temperatures and also the level of greenhouse gases were at a record high, is what the report has confirmed. Now, this comes even as US President Donald Trump has announced that America will quit the Paris Climate Pact, and the report says that 2016 has surpassed 2015 as the hottest year in 137 years from the time since which records have been kept. Now, nearly 500 scientists from 60 different countries contributed to this report. Well, Well, that's all the time we have in this edition of the News Bulletin. But don't go anywhere, for coming up on the other side of the short break is my colleague Sumit Chaturvedi, who gives you the latest market update in WION Wallet. Stay tuned.